The country of focus today and secure the continent is Sudan. The Sudanese town of Kerenik in West Darfur was plunged into a sort of deja vu on April the 22nd following the killing of 2 men of the Arab Rizegat community by unknown perpetrators. About 1,000 armed members of the same group stormed the town in an attack in which at least 8 men of the African Masalit people and 7 Arab men were killed. There was a retaliation attack and the violence spread to more than 15 nearby towns with more than 200 dead. We have details for you in this package.
2003. Clashes between the Arab and the non-Arab populations of Sudan's Darfur region has led to the death of thousands of people. This is one of the longest-running conflicts on the African continent. In 2019, a popular uprising in Sudan led to the removal of Omar al-Bashir, the autocratic former leader of the country and a man alleged to have committed human rights offenses. On the 31st of December 2020, UNAMID, the United Nations peacekeeping force that has helped the country manage the violence for more than a decade, left Sudan. The effect of that exit has been an escalation in the violence, as local rivalries between tribes bow to the surface, and now these pockets of violence have grown into full-blown war yet again. In April 2022, a clash between the Arab and the non-Arab population of Darfur led to the death of at least 168 people. It was one of the deadliest bouts of violence in the country in the last few years. Since the exit of UNAMID and the coup that led to the ousting of al-Bashir, Sudan's Darfur region has seen insecurity grow, with the widening security gap threatening not just the country but the larger region. What can bring the violence to an end? Can the warring parties even find peace with each other?
Joining me to analyze this situation in Sudan and the program today, Niemat Ahmadi. She is the president of Darfur Women Action Group. She joins in live from Washington, D.C. in the United States. I also have with me in the joining live from Berlin, Germany, I have Dr. Jan Popsipil, a research director at the Austrian Peace Institute from Vienna, Austria. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Secure the Continent. Nice to have you both on the program.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Now, I'd like to start with Jan. Jan, can you please explain to our viewers the genesis of this conflict in Darfur?
I mean, when we go back to the longer conflict, I mean, Sudan has always had the problem of centralized power that led to severe issues in various parts of its peripheries. Darfur is one of these peripheries. It was as well the south, the east, so in various parts, basically. And these challenges came basically immediately after independence. Darfur was not so much in the focus with the main focus of conflict in Sudan in the south after independence. But especially then during the the negotiations with the SPLA, with the Sudanese People's Liberation Army, and then the subsequent kind of comprehensive peace agreement with what is now South Sudan, Darfur basically escalated. You could make the claim almost that the Bashir regime that had been in power at this point for about 20 years used the negotiations with the SPLA in the south and its concessions it made during the CPA period for, at the same time, strategically decide to basically tighten the grip on Darfur, send the army in, train and basically recruit local militias, and started like a brutal war against the armed opposition groups in the area around the early 2000s that then led to a huge number of casualties, especially mid-2000s. There was then several attempts of peacemaking in the region. There was Abuja. First, there was a negotiation there. Later in Doha, they all kind of failed. And UNAMID, then the United Nations mission in Darfur, as it was in the package before shown, managed to keep the violence down until then finally Bashir was ousted. And then there was a brief period of hope where you might think that the Juba peace agreement that then was negotiated after basically the democratic revolution in Sudan in 2019 would lead indeed to a better situation in this conflict. But now it seems after the military coup that happened in Sudan that the situation severely deteriorated.
Thank you very much, Jan. I'd like to bring in Niemat here. We've heard about the Janjaweed, the evil horsemen that have been responsible for a lot of the violence in Darfur. Who are the other main actors in this conflict?
Well, unfortunately, the main actors are the rapid support forces. As you may know, that Janjaweed have been promoted into the rapid support forces, and they have integrated, become like one of the main military actors in Sudan, with their leaders right now sitting in the highest office in Sudan. So these are militias from Arab tribes in the early days that were recruited and supported by the Bashir regime. And most of them were promoted. And then to the highest office. Now they have the leaders sitting in Khartoum. And in 2019, when Bashir was ousted, the hope was high. People were hoping that now peace will take its course, that people will be protected, and there would be time that people can go home. Unfortunately, even the bravery lived change that happened within other areas in Sudan, it did not happen in Darfur. Nearly 3 million people have been forced out their homes, and they are yet to go home because the Janjaweed are very present, the rapid support forces are very present everywhere in Darfur, controlling the cities, the villages, even attacking people in the internally displaced camps. And these people who have been attacked, this is not the first time they have been attacked, several hundreds of times since the beginning of the genocide attack in Darfur.
Now, Niemat, staying with you, the famous Darfur genocide happened on the government of Omar al-Bashir, the ousted former president. You also said that there were hopes when he was removed from office that maybe peace will return to Darfur. How come there's been no let-off in violence, even though there's a new government in Khartoum? And how different is this government from Omar al-Bashir's government in addressing the conflict in Darfur?
Well, that's a very important question. I think even though technically al-Bashir was removed, his totalitarian regime was very present. And the two generals who are sitting in the Sovereign Council, General Al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, Hemeti are close associates of al-Bashir, but they are the upper hand of al-Bashir committing all these atrocities. And the only reason that Hemeti has rose to power because of the number of people he killed, the number of villages that were destroyed. So there was no change at the lower level. The government agencies and the military, the national military has no say in Sudan. These are the military that have been very active since the al-Bashir's ouster. So, and then after the coup, they felt emboldened because they felt like during the interim period, there was like a mixed feeling, even though in Darfur attacks continued to take place. But there was a period in which people were hopeful that change will take its course. But then after the coup, the military felt emboldened, and now they feel that they have the control over the country and that the military are now controlling. So they know that they can continue to commit these atrocities without accountability or with total immunity. So they continue to do that. And then in West Darfur, it has been very systematic. These attacks have been directed toward African indigenous in Darfur, by the Arab militias backed by the government, it is still the same systemic attack that started 20 years ago in Darfur. It's still happening today, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Niemat. I'd like to bring in Jan. So, Jan, we've heard from Niemat, these attacks have been going on. It's almost like a periodic thing. It happens from time to time. What exactly, I mean, the first time the government went into Darfur, it was under the pretext of fighting a rebellion. So what exactly does the government and the Janjaweed and the RSF want? Clearly, they've beaten back the revolt. So why do they seem so intent on continuing to kill innocent people and driving them away from their land?
I mean, it depends, I guess, on the areas of Darfur we are talking about. I mean, especially now in the West, there is, first of all, I mean, we have to be clear, the Rapid Support Forces are a well-armed entity, but they remain, in the end, a militia. And the level of discipline is not particularly high.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jan. Mm-hmm. Is the Rapid Support Forces different from the regular Sudanese army? Are they a unit of the army?
Yeah. So this is important to note here. We're talking about two completely different entities, and I would say, I mean, Ahmadi and Burhan. So Burhan as the head of the Sudanese Armed Forces, and Ahmadi as the head of the Rapid Support Forces. They have a kind of as has been said, like a good alliance, an alliance. They need one another, but it's in a way also an uneasy alliance. There has always been, since the Juba Peace Agreement was signed in 2020, the talk of bringing all together, reforming the security sector, even when there was still the civilian government under Hamdok in place, and integrate the Rapid Support Forces into the Sudanese army. But Ahmadi was always rejecting that, for the very reason that the Rapid Support Forces are also, I mean, as is the Sudanese army, but in kind of other businesses, a business operation. It's used in the gold mines in North Darfur. It is used also to fight in other wars like Yemen, as does, by the way, the Sudanese armed forces, but at a bit in a different stage. But it's not the same entity. It's not the same entity as has even happened in West Darfur, that there were firefights between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces. But as said, the important element here is that the RSF is not that well controlled. So what is without doubt here, that they have a mindset of attacking certain groups, villages, and when there is tension, they go armed after people, after communities, without any mercy. I'm not sure at the moment if this is indeed a planned move by Ahmadi in Darfur, because at the moment the military regime banks everything what comes in terms of its national and international legitimacy on stabilization. What we see in Darfur now is a complete security breakdown, which is actually playing against the tactical and also actually the strategic interests of the current military junta. So it seems more that the RSF is not at the moment a unity in complete control and in really functional command structures.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. Now, Niemat, what are the ethnic divisions in Darfur, and would you say it's part of the reason why we're seeing the recent escalation in the conflict? What are the ethnic divisions, one, and also what is responsible for this recent escalation of violence we've seen in Darfur?
Well, the ethnic division, like in Darfur, over the years, there has been several tribes. And the tribal affiliation has not been, it has been used as a cultural pride and also as kind of like a social contract between tribes rather than like a source of division. And there has never been a problem between tribes in the past. But since the government of al-Bashir, the former regime, has used the Arab against African, so it becomes systematic that mostly the Arab tribes are emboldened not all the Arabs, but mostly the Rizegad, the northern Rizegad, who are camel herders, but now they have imported and brought Arabs from other African countries, from Chad, Central African Republic, from Mali and Niger. You find people, part of the Rapid Support Force, who are not speaking Sudanese language. Some of them speak French, some of them speak other dialects. And they are all in high military rank. They were given passport, and they have actually occupied the land of the Darfuri displaced and refugee people when they fled. Right now, most areas have been occupied by these people. Some of them brought their families, they brought their livestock, and they occupied this land. Even if today there is a complete peace in Darfur, most Darfuri indigenous have to fight to get their land back, which they're not equipped to do. So it is very clear that this ethnic division is escalated by the government, and also the government-backed ethnic or racial war that is directed against the indigenous African, but also they have a bigger plan. There is a lot of credible allegation that this Arab coalition is working toward reaching into controlling power in Sudan. They're creating Arab Islamic belt between Sudan up to Senegal, including Mali, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic. So there is a lot of intersection, but now we see that in Sudan, and I think this is very important, has to be taken serious because it's going to have a regional dimension. It still has created that, but it's going to be even more serious. As of now, we receive recording of Arab mobilizing from different countries and telling their people to, whoever living, whether you Mali or Libya, get into the government. They are telling, as of this last week, we are receiving these recording videos, mobilizing, gathering themselves, joining, they asking them to join the military in any of these countries because they believe that that gives them power. So it's very dangerous situation right now.
Now, staying with you, Niemat, you just painted a very desperate and very terrible situation of the things that have happened in Darfur, and they've been going on for years now. Why has efforts to bring about lasting peace, peace treaties, why have they not been working?
Well, unfortunately, number one, the government in the center that control the power, they're not willing to give away power. They don't want to give the Darfuris or other opposition group equal share, but also the government knows that they have committed crimes. And the case of Darfur has been referred to the International Criminal Court. So bringing peace means stability in Sudan, and means that people will move toward pursuing justice and transitional justice. And so something that for them is a matter of life and death. So they want to maintain the status quo so that they can get away with immunity. But then also they have a strategy, and they are really, unfortunately, supported by some regional powers within the region, like the Middle Eastern countries, like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar. They're all supporting this notion of maintaining the status quo in Sudan. So because of that kind of backing, regional backing, they're not willing to give up. And they think of peace agreement as an opportunity to give vacancies to people rather than resolving the underlying causes of the conflict or giving people equal right in their own country or protecting. And now there is another dimension, the economic dimension, come into play when Darfur is recognized by having, it's rich of natural resources, gold, uranium, oil, and let alone the fertile land and the livestock and every other aspect. They get used to selling gold from Darfur in the black market. They want to continue to control that. And the more they have the money, the more they have military, they are not willing to have peace because they have nothing to lose.
Thank you very much, Niemat. We have Mohammed Osman. He's a researcher with Human Rights Watch. He's in standby. He'll join us in the second half of the program. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation on the recent escalation of violence in Darfur. Stay with us. This is Secure the Continent. You're welcome back to Secure the Continent. If you're just joining in, we've been discussing the conflict in Darfur, and I still have here with me Niemat Ahmadi, Popsipil, and just joining in from Khartoum in Sudan, Mohammed. Osman, thank you very much for staying with the program. I would like to come to Mohammed. Mohammed, on the 31st of July 2007, the United Nations Security Council, with the consent of Sudan, agreed to deploy a peacekeeping force of up to 26,000 international military and police personnel in Darfur. The Combined African and United Nations Hybrid Force, UNAMID, formally took over authority from the African Union mission in Sudan, AMIS, on January the 1st, 2008. My question to you is, how effective had this mission been in providing protection for civilians in Darfur?
Hello?
Yes, Mohammed, did you get my question?
Yes. Actually, this mission, the United Nations African Union hybrid mission, has deployed, as you said, in 2008, and since then, actually, the situation was not better than in before, and was not better even than after the withdrawal of the UNAMID, actually. Although on the political dimension, we can say that the presence of these forces at least is something that the government put it into the consideration of how the international community looking towards Sudan regarding the human rights situation and the violations in Darfur through maybe the mirror of this mission. But actually on the ground, and according to the people that we talk to in the IDP camps, in the village, in the rural areas, in the villages, in the outskirts, and even far from the town, from the cities, the situation wasn't ever better for the deployment of the United Nations mission, and it's actually part of the controversiality about the deployment of UN peacekeeping missions in North Africa and what they did in different parts of Africa, even the big mistakes that they did. I mean, in our neighboring countries like in South Sudan, in other areas, in Abyei, in different areas. And there are even many incidents that even this mission has failed. And sometimes the peacekeepers themselves have rejected to let the civilians who fled from the militias, the attackers, to let inside the camps of the United Nations. That happened in several occasions. So and you may also hear about the scandal of that mission of.
Hello, Mohammed.
Something when the spokeswoman of the resign.
Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties with Mohammed, but we'll try to get back to you soon. I'd like to bring in Jan. Jan, in December of 2020, the United Nations Security Council terminated the mandate of the joint United Nations African Peacekeeping Force, UNAMID, and called on the government to assume full responsibility for civilian security. A new political mission, the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, UNITAMS, was mandated to support the strengthening of the protection of human rights, in particular in conflict-affected areas. My question to you, Jan, is this. How effective has UNITAMS been in protecting civilians, and what is the major difference in the mandates between UNAMID and UNITAMS?
I think the major difference is just what you mentioned, because UNITAMS is neither mandated nor able nor equipped to protect civilians. UNITAMS is a political mission to support the transition process and the implementation of the Juba Peace Agreement. As such, they don't have any military or police component. And given this, they have actually no kind of hard ability to implement whatever protection mandate. So their capacity is...
in essence, it makes the communities in Darfur open to attacks, the departure of UNAMID.
I mean, the problem was that the end of UNAMID was connected with the transition process in Sudan, which was always kind of achieved to go kind of well. But of course, it didn't go well. There was the military coup from October. And the idea of a political mission that would kind of collaborate with Sudanese security actors in maintaining the security situation in Darfur, this approach failed completely. So basically after UNAMID left, the security situation deteriorated immediately. They even looted the former UNAMID camps even before the mission was completely out, when it was basically wrapping up. But UNITAMS is of course not in a position to implement whatever security measures. And when it comes to protection mandate, they're between a rock and a hard place. They are looked very critically by the opposition movement in Sudan because they are perceived to talk too much to the military anyway. If they wanted to improve the security situation in places like Darfur or areas like Darfur, on the other hand, they have, of course, talked to Ahmadi, they have to talk to Minawi and the Darfurian signatories of the peace agreement, because they would be supposed to maintain this security and kind of follow and implement the protection agenda. But this is just at the moment not possible. So UNITAMS is just, I guess, in terms of protection, at a lost cause at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. I would like to bring in Niemat. Now, Niemat, your organization does a lot of humanitarian work. What has been the effect of this cycle of conflict to the communities in Darfur? What are some of the humanitarian effects? And how are people in Darfur surviving?
Unprecedented humanitarian crisis because in the face of these attacks, there's a few first, like because of the insecurity and lack of protection, most humanitarian agencies confined into the large or main cities within the various Darfur states. And in the events like the recent attacks in West Darfur, the UN agencies have evacuated their staff that's like based on the UN mandate. And unfortunately, people are left without humanitarian assistance, like no health and assistance, no food, no shelter, no trauma counseling and psychosocial support is completely non-existent because of the limited humanitarian access in Darfur. So I think you spoke about UNAMID with my other colleague in this program, but UNAMID was not effective, we all know, but the reason it wasn't effective because of the control by the government of Sudan and the ongoing limitation and restriction that were placed, but also the government of Sudan has selectively selected some African and Asian countries, troop contributing countries, whereby Sudan have interest and those countries have interest with Sudan to control the way the troops operate. But at least when they were present in the event of the attack. People can go to UNAMID hospital. In some occasions, they provide patrol to the humanitarian actors, and they provide patrol to women within and around the internally displaced camps in some areas. But that right now is non-existent. So there is a huge humanitarian crisis. And following the coup, many NGOs or donors have withdrawn funding from Sudan. Changing the interim government has kind of limited access to Sudan again, and many NGOs have lost funding, and that also limited their ability to deliver humanitarian assistance. As of now, it's a very dangerous humanitarian situation because most NGOs are unable to safely operate, and then some NGOs lost the funding due to the suspension, and then instability and lack of security on the ground, including the attack on the Save the Children base in West Darfur in Krani. that is like kind of like an indicator. Also, the recent attack in Al-Fashir to at the WFP warehouse and the former Unamid base. These are all indicators that it's very dangerous and a threat to the humanitarian operation. So people on the ground right now, they're left with minimal to no humanitarian access in most cases. And that's why when the attack in Krenik happened, there was a huge health need, but also the attackers followed people up to the hospital. So it's creating a humanitarian crisis that have not been seen anywhere in the recent history. In some other countries, even though there is violence, you find that humanitarians have some sort of respect from the country, but that's not the case in Sudan, unfortunately.
Quite a terrible situation there. Niemat, staying with you, you mentioned displaced persons camps and refugees. Are these camps safe havens from attacks?
Unfortunately not. People are attacked in the camps repeatedly, and people have to move, creating new camps. Like every time they are attacked, they move into a new place. Like recently, many people have crossed the border to Chad, adding to the number of like over 300,000 refugee population that were fled in 2003. They have yet to return home, but now they are receiving new refugees. But also within the Sudan, there was recent attack in Zamzam camp in Al-Fashir, North Darfur. There are some constant attack around in West Darfur. They attacked Krinding camp several times. The Krenik, there were like people who are living there as displaced. These are not just people within the city, but also some people who have been displaced earlier. And it's just, there is no safe haven at all. And when you call like the internal displaced person camp in Darfur, not like any camp anywhere else around the world. These are like makeshift camp, but people are not safe. Under international law, refugees and internally displaced persons are supposed to be protected. Unfortunately, not the case in Darfur. People are very vulnerable to attack, and they are attacked every day, and violence against women is systemic against the internally displaced people who are living in camps, unfortunately.
Quite a terrible situation there. Thank you, Niemat. I'd like to bring in Mohammed. Now, Mohammed, we've heard that in Sudan, everything is just is special in the sense that UNITAMS is not very effective. Even donor agencies are not spared. World Food Programme warehouses are not spared from violence. Humanitarian aid workers are attacked, and you also just heard from Niemat that refugee camps and camps for internally displaced people are not safe. Is the international community being distracted with the power tussle in Khartoum? And what is the United Nations doing about this to improve the plight of Darfurians?
The question is, in essence, what the international community, UN, can do here, and I mean, the problem is, it is at the moment like a very difficult situation. It appears, and you mentioned the power tossing in Khartoum, that at the moment the military junta uses this peace agreement to push back the democracy movement. At the same time, the signatories of this Juba peace agreement are technically more or less also in charge of the security in Darfur. Mini Minawi, one of the signatories from one of the SLM splinter groups, he is basically governor of Darfur and technically in charge of governance. He's not able basically to secure the security situation. They called the army in. For the internationals in this situation, it is very, very difficult. I mean, the problem is, as long as the military junta is in place like that, the opposition is kind of split up, and the signatories to the peace agreement are basically all over the place when it comes to the politics, rather aligning with the military. And of course, like in a way, the RSF would never move against their own elements, even if they're undisciplined. It's very difficult to maintain order. It's also hard to say at the moment what could happen at the Security Council. We have to take into account that Ahmadi and the RSF have struck a deal with the Wagner Group, which is basically the main Russian private military company and very close to the Kremlin. Ahmadi was in Moscow when the Ukraine war started. And so he's very close to the Russians. It's also very clear that Wagner, this private military company, facilitates gold trade to Russia to help them with the foreign exchange reserves. So what Sudan, basically, the military junta can rely on is that nothing in the UN Security Council will happen against them because Russia has a veto power. There's no way that there will be strong measures put in place against them. And with this structural configuration, and it has been mentioned also, like the support from Egypt, the support apart from some of the Gulf states, it's at the moment a very difficult place where I couldn't see the UN really doing more as they do at the moment.
Thank you very much, Jan. Now, Niemat, earlier this year, we witnessed a landmark case. A former militia leader in Sudan, Ali Mohammed Ali Abd al-Rahman, was accused of leading thousands of pro-government fighters on a systematic campaign of murder, rape, and torture during the height of violence in Darfur. And he was a revered commander of the Janjaweed. Now, looking at him stand in trial earlier this year, did that, what effect did he have on you? And do you feel that justice might be served to thousands of people that have been killed in this conflict?
Well, I think even though the trial of Ali Kosheb has come really late, it's really sad for the victim to wait 20 years to see that justice is being served for them. But I think it is a very important milestone because it is important to show that accountability is real and possible. It also has provided the first ever opportunity for the Darfur victims to be heard, their story to be told in a court of justice. So that's the significance of the Ali Kosheb trial, but also has shown that no one is above the law. No matter how much power you have, one day you will have to face your fate in a court. And that's something that is like really needed to be shown to the Sudanese people, because the notion now in Sudan is that the more power you have, the money and the weapon you have, you can do whatever you want and you will get away with immunity. For the people of Darfur, justice is not less than seeing al-Bashir behind bars. But it's important that now the case, the trial started against Ali Kosheb, but more needs to be done to pursue justice. And I think even the coup happened because of lack of accountability. And that's why it's very important to focus on accountability in a country or in a situation like Darfur and Sudan, where multiple crimes, serious international crimes has been committed. It cannot be resolved with negotiated peace alone. Justice has to be prioritized. And we have called for an atrocity prevention approach that will start with accountability. We have seen the presidents in the case of Rwanda, the case of Liberia, the case of Sierra Leone, and you can name it, in places where genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity took place. Resolution was not being made through a traditional conflict resolution mechanism, and that's why the international community doing the same thing and expecting different results. They're trying to using traditional conflict resolution mechanism that didn't work, and it's not going to work. Accountability must be prioritized when it comes to Sudan, and that's why I think the trial of Ali Kosheb is really, really important. And if this case is successful, it will help bring more credibility, it bring more trust among the affected communities, but also it will send an important signal to those in Khartoum who are still having their troop on the ground committing crimes against the people of Sudan.
Thank you, Niemat. Just before we begin to wrap up, I'll stay with you before I move to Jan, and I'm going to ask Jan the same question. What would it take? Could you paint us a picture out of this conflict, if you could? What would it take to bring about lasting peace to Darfur? Yes, Niemat, the question is directed to you.
what it takes to bring peace, I think accountability is of a significant importance, and that the international community must take an effective approach, holding those who are leading the government right now in Sudan accountable, because it's clear that they took part in what is happening in Darfur, and the troop is still committing atrocities. Bringing Bashir and those who are wanted by the international community, criminal court, to face trial, to make justice real. And that it takes effort by the international community, but also for the Sudanese themselves, the Sudanese people, to unite and to unite behind accountability, because there has been a history of leaders in Sudan committing crimes, getting away with it because they are political leaders. And that has to end. And even after the uprising, some Sudanese were advocating that, Bashir should not be sent to The Hague, he can be tried in Sudan. The judiciary system in Sudan is not independent, doesn't have capacity or competence or willingness. So it's important as of now to focus on supporting the ICC to continue bringing those who are most responsible, and then establishing the base for justice for the future. Using atrocity prevention approach rather than traditional conflict resolution mechanism. But we also advocate that international community must use the tool at hand, imposing targeted sanction against individuals, military leaders who are responsible of these atrocities. Those who conducted the coup d'etat and stopped the interim, violated the interim constitution, must be faced with targeted sanctions, asset freezing. If that money that is flowing for them to buy weapons doesn't come in, yes, or their assets are frozen, they will not be having the ability to buy more weapons and kill more people, and also impose travel ban on them. If there was a travel ban on place, Hemeti would not have been able to travel to Russia. So these are all tools at hand. It can be implemented multilaterally or bilaterally by international community, including the US and other European governments.
Thank you, Niemat. Now, Jan, what would it take to bring about lasting peace to Darfur?
I mean, lasting peace is a big thing. Huh? I think the obvious kind of things are two components, and the first is the military junta has to give up power in whatever kind of way to a civilian-led government. This ideally is even democratically elected. But, I mean, this might be a stretch, but like a civilian-led government would, the first step, make a difference. But the second, and this is a more and more important step, is it probably needs a broader inclusive dialogue, not just in Darfur, but in Sudan as a whole, that includes all those who have been over decades basically excluded from the power structures and the political settlement of what is Sudan, and have been economically, socially marginalized. And this kind of dialogue should be something that could lead to a new agreements, new kinds of kind of even a constitutional order in ideal kind of ways that might help to slowly start to build up the nucleus of a peaceful kind of living together in Darfur.
Thank you very much, Niemat and Jan. This is where we'll drop the anchor on today's program. Thank you very much for your insight and time. And we do hope that peace comes to Darfur someday.
Indeed, we do hope so. And thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Now, from our conversation today, it is evident that the Sudanese government must fulfill its commitment referred to in resolutions 1564 and 1556 to disarm and prosecute members of the Janjaweed militia and all those responsible for human rights abuses and violations of international humanitarian law. The United Nations should also adopt and implement a plan to ensure the security and protection of civilians at risk and to reverse ethnic cleansing. The plan should promote the creation of an environment conducive to the voluntary return and safety and dignity of all refugees and internally displaced persons to their places of origin. Thank you very much for watching Secure the Continent today. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. See you next week on another edition of The Continent. Bye-bye.